Hello and welcome to the Rubber Duck Dev Show. I'm Chris,
And I'm Creston.
And I'm Kota.
and we are excited to have our friend back here today. We are going to talk about Burnout, and I think this is a timely show because we're
Is that
getting,
the new video game?
yeah, right, yeah, the new video game. Um, we're gonna, it's getting towards the end of the year, and that's when people start, getting their biggest need for a vacation. They're getting burnout. It's, we're just brains are starting to want to just go. I need a break. So I think this will be a good conversation. Um, but before we get into the fun stuff, week in review. Creston, how was your week?
Pretty good. I do want to thank if anyone from the show signed up for the Zoom call about my course that I'm developing, the Postgres course. Thank you for that. I have sent out emails to the people who reached out to coordinate times to have those Zoom calls, and I'm scheduling for next week. So thanks for everyone that did that.
Awesome.
Apart from that, you know how I was saying I think it was, I can't remember which episode it was, whether it was last week or not, that I think it was a show that Chris and I did together, but we were talking about how I had never really stepped into the container realm for building my app,
Ah,
and that I'm still relying on Capistrano and whatnot. I never, went into Kubernetes and whatnot. Well, I have a client who says, "Hey, we want to move our database into Kubernetes, and we want to do it in 3 weeks." So I'm like, okay, time to study.
oh
So
boy.
Has to be Kubernetes, not none of the other simpler ones, Docker Swarm, anything like that. No. Okay.
no. I
Dang
did.
it.
They were already using it for uh, their application servers. So I think they're just basically, well, let's just extend it and do the whole thing with it. But I don't even know Docker Swarm at this point. I mean, I'm getting up to speed. Like, I've downloaded Docker and I'm going through their whole process and whatnot. Thankfully, I actually tried doing this. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. No, no, excuse me, 2 months ago. And there was some weird thing with Linux where you had to install this and you had to be careful of this. But when I checked the docs more recently, like in the last couple of days, it's it's hard to call it more streamlined because you still have about 15 manual steps to get it up and running. I don't know if it's the same on a Mac or a PC, but it at least was clear what I needed to do. But through that process, I got it up and running and testing out containers and running them and just getting used to using it. But of course, once you understand the Docker and creating the Docker container, then I need to up level my knowledge to Kubernetes. So I'm getting to that point. But anyway, that's what's been going on with me. What about you, Chris?
So I am still just really busy with this acquisition and the merging of engineering teams. This is a level of integration that I've never had to deal with before. It's a huge amount of stuff, and it's probably going to be 6 to 8 months before things are really integrated and settled. Um, but it's, we're taking on somewhere on the order of, I think, 30 to 35 engineers, which is a little more than double our team size. So bringing that many people in all at once from a different product and is daunting. It's fun, it's exciting, and it's challenging, but man, it's a big job.
Out of
Um,
curiosity, where's the big time? I don't want to say time sink, but what's taking so much of the time resources to do this? Is it just having meetings? Is it trying to decide?
there's a lot of that, but it's for me personally, it's mostly just kind of helping my bosses keep their plates clear so that they can concentrate on the logistics of getting everybody
Okay.
trained and and I'm helping with some of the training and talking to the new folks and getting them on board for the people that are going to be in my area, but most of it is just me kind of clearing roadblocks for other people so they can do all the training and stuff. um but it's, man, it's a lot. It's going to be fun though. I'm excited about it, but whoo.
So you said this is double the size of your team. So
Oh, it sounds like
a little bit
it's
more.
almost
Yeah.
tripling the size.
so it's tripling the size of the organization. Is that right?
Well, not the organization, but our team. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's
I see.
it's big. It's quite the, I mean, so our division of, I work for Shift 4, but I actually work for Venue Next, which was bought by Shift 4. So we're a company inside Shift 4, and Venue Next has acquired their biggest competitor. So it's doubling the size of this company, but not the parent company. So, but man,
If we had time, he'd draw a flow chart.
Yeah, it's a big thing. But it's keeping me busy. Yeah, so looking forward to getting a brain break here at the end of the year for sure. So how about you, Kota?
Yeah, so we just finished a pretty big contract for us and sort of doing some work on like controlling multiple robots and things like that. And that was actually a cool project because I think it was really kind of my first time ever digging into React, which I know sounds strange that, I hadn't really done that before, but turns on Robot Land, you're typically in, C++ or Python, and you're dealing with these low level things. And, so that's kind of the world I'm from. And, we have a team that does a lot of our sort of UI and the web systems kinds of things. And so I personally hadn't really done much of that before this, but I got to use React 3 Fiber, which I don't know if either of you have played with. Have you?
I haven't. I've heard of it,
before?
but
yeah, so it's actually pretty cool. It makes it very, very easy to define your scenes, your 3D scenes. And so then I was able to do that, and I wrote some GLSL as well, to do some shader things. And so essentially the application, this is like a fifth of the contract, but the application I'm referring to is the simulator to simulate about 1,000 different robots all driving at the same time and like coordinating them. And you can actually run this all on, I was able to actually run it at real time on my computer, on just like my dev machine, which is a laptop. So
wow,
I was pretty pleased about that. I think I used, there was all this, I used like some GPU stuff, some CUDA to parallelize a lot of things. And then I have, of course, it's multi-threaded. And then I used U WebSockets, which is which is a server in C++ that claims to be 1,000 times faster than Node.js. I don't know if I believe it,
really?
But it kind of powers a lot of the other kind of major servers and things. So I just kind of used that directly since.
That's a bold claim. 1,000 times.
Yeah. But but at the same time, it probably lacks a lot of the features, at least off the shelf, that you'd want in a production system where, in terms of security and things like that, which frankly, I don't really care much about, or like load management, probably. I don't know. So a lot of these things I don't really need to worry about, since I'm concerned about, one or two people usually touching this thing at a time. And it's local, so it's not really, so I got to play with that, and it was overall a pretty fun experience. I learned a lot, and, but it was great.
Cool. So yeah, it's always fun to play with new toys. Mm-hmm. That's always a highlight of my week if I get a chance to do that. So I feel you, man.
This was a couple months, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all right, well, let's get into Burnout. We obviously, I mean, Kota never burns out, but we
it's not true.
Everybody burns out. I've been through several burnout phases in my career. I even went so far as to, after doing it for 20 years, I was just so burnt out on programming at all that I stopped programming for 2 years and went off and did something else for a while, and then came back to it. Most people don't do it that drastically, but you know, I think what it was is that I didn't manage my burnout over that 2 decade period, and so it just got out of control. So I've since learned some things about how to deal with that a little better. But what do you think, Kota? What kind of stuff do you do to kind of prevent or mitigate burnout?
Gee, yeah. So I mean, I think the big thing that people talk a lot about is like work-life balance, and I think that's important. But there's also kind of the key thing, if anything, is just consistency, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you have some time for yourself and you also have methods to make sure that you don't get overwhelmed. So it's not really kind of that work-life balance per se, but it's really the amount that you're overwhelmed, I think, that really causes the burnout. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's, yeah, sort of read a couple things sort of about that. I've had a lot of I've had some issues with burnout in the past. I think I went be, leading up until when I started the company, that I started a company, and then up until maybe 3 or 4 years in, there was a period of almost 5 years where I did not take a single day off.
Ooh.
And so like at minimum, I was working 2 or 3 hours every day for uh, 4 or 5 years straight. Took zero vacations and just kind of went for it. And then I got pretty burnt out. So I can tell you that's not what you're supposed to do. I have plenty
Yeah.
of counter examples, but
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So what about you, Kristen?
So I guess, I mean, my level of burnout has just been more subtle, nothing big and dramatic, meaning that, um, so like I just question, it's like, is this the right thing? I get tired of doing something. I think that's, as opposed to burning out, it's like I get tired of doing something. Like a couple of months ago, doing different episodes of something like doing scaling Postgres, I kind of question, hey, should I really be doing this? Should I be doing something else? And it's just asking questions with regard to that and saying, is this where I should spending my time? Should I be spending it somewhere else? So that's most of what the burnout I've experienced. It's not anything drastic that I had to step away, but it's mostly getting tired of doing some certain thing and I don't know, wanting to change or something like that in terms of what I've experienced. Although I have had stressful issues and physical manifestations of that, I don't know if I necessarily call that burnout.
That's just stress.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, I don't know. I think of burnout as being more long term
Yeah.
and needing more time to, whereas if you're stressed, and even if you have like some sort of stress event or something, or, you break out in hives or something like that, I would kind of think that's a more over short term thing
Yeah.
that's impacted you. Even if it is work related and working too much or whatever, I think that's more short term. Whereas burnout is, I think, a cumulative buildup of things
Yeah.
over time.
A longer term thing. And you get to a point, I mean, I think of it as you get to a point where I just don't want to do this thing for work anymore, at least for a while. I need to stop doing this. Not just for an hour and go take a walk. It's I need to stop doing this for a living for a bit is I think when you're at the point of burnout. Not that you want to abandon or change careers, but it's like I need some time away from this.
I actually considered whether I should leave my company after, at one point, and then I kind of, yeah, I think I kind of recognized that I was I think there's the recognition that I was very burnt out. And then there was the feeling of almost being kind of trapped in that situation where I didn't really know how to end up in a situation that wasn't very stressful, because at the time we, didn't have a very big budget, and not that we, I'd always like a bigger budget, but
Yeah.
and then but I think the big thing for me was being in a situation where um I felt like I was stuck in a stressful situation without really a way out of it. And that
Mm,
was really, that made it very hard to, I had days where I was just completely unproductive.
yeah.
Um, and I
Yeah.
think even though that was years ago at this point, even now I have to make sure that I'm sort of, in some ways, it can be a little bit tricky to have the same level of enthusiasm as I have at certain parts of my life in terms of technology. Um, that actually happened to coincide partly with when I started playing a little bit with sort of like Dragon Ruby as well.
Hmm.
And that's very, very expressive and kind of helped me rediscover what's fun about programming, about development.
Yeah, I
So
had kind of this exact same experience. When I got into Dragon Ruby, it was nice to use Ruby completely differently than what I did for web apps. And so it kind of helped me fall in love with it again, and see different ways to do things and kind of freshen it up for me. And I think that's part of it too, is as human beings, I think we tend to not like things to get stale. And if there's not something new coming along once in a while, we tend to just get bored with the drudgery. I will say that I think a lot of burnout has, or what leads to burnout has to do with different temperaments. Some people love. I do the same thing every day, and that's how that works for me. I'm not like that. I get like Creston. I think I get really bored with stuff after a while. I like to constantly be getting into new things and learning new things. I'm very bad at finishing, but I'm really good at starting. Um,
Well, no, I'm not quite that way.
no, not like that, but not to that extreme. You will bulldog things for a while. You've got a lot more discipline than I do for following things through. Um,
Yeah, I mean, but I think, yeah, I mean, I think I have a longer runway before things impact me as much.
yeah.
But I think an also component to it is, what am I doing? Because like when I'm thinking about like some of the scaling Postgres stuff, the thing that I hate doing more than anything else was editing the episodes. So for example, this pod, I'll call it a podcast, or this show, we don't do any editing. We just record it, throw it up there.
Mm-hmm.
However, scaling Postgres is highly edited. Like there are probably 200 cuts per episode just based on how I record it. It's pretty atrocious slash shocking. And I would record the episode and I'm like, I gotta do the edit. And that was just a bear. But what I've done is I'm now using some external help to say, someone says, hey, I like doing some video editing. I was like, okay, great, here. So I think it's also a little bit what that helps prevent the point I'm getting to, what helps prevent burnout is, for lack of a better term, what lights you up, or what do you enjoy doing versus what you don't do. Because the more your day is spent doing things that don't light you up, or you're kind of like, I can do it, I don't necessarily want to do it. The more you do that, the more burned out you're going to get, and faster, is my feeling on that.
Yeah. So Coda, what kind of things do you do? I mean, because you've been through burnout, I'm going to assume more than maybe once in your career. But what kind of things do you do? Have you learned to do to kind of keep that at bay?
yeah, so I mean, I think one of the big things is to think like managing customers is actually, in my case, it's a little bit of a, I think one of my cases of burnout was a situation where, we have customers overseas in East Asia, and I would get phone calls at random times if something wasn't going well. So it's basically on call, every day from, you know, basically 7 p.m. till around 11 or 12 is when I would, up till then was
when
when
they
I would
when they went
potentially
to
get a
sleep.
call. Right. Yeah. And then that would be when the call would start. And I don't know, it like could potentially lead to diving into some support thing that, that would
Eesh.
be like several hours long from there. And then and this could happen at any point. So essentially, I felt like I was stuck right here because if I ever left home in the evenings or anything, then, I might get a call and then get pulled right back, so I couldn't schedule anything. I felt like I was always stuck here. It was like I was frankly getting a little bit scared of my phone. Um, so there's kind of a lot of things like that was tricky. And I think we started allocating, essentially basically saying we have like a fixed number of support hours, and anything beyond that there would be an additional charge, and we made the charge a little bit higher, and that drastically reduced the calls. And then
Yeah.
so that alone, and then I think also the big thing was that we kind of went back and looked at how part of the issue is that all of our systems run in these environments where they're actually not connected to the internet. So, these are on-premise installations, and, and so if something goes wrong, then, and this was early on, so we didn't quite have all the infrastructure that we do now. So I think for that, really making sure that we had kind of the infrastructure and this, when something unexpected happens, how do we handle that is sort of that whole pipeline is something that we didn't really have to the same degree that we have now. And that really made a big difference.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of been in those situations before, so I hear that. Not, the being tied to your phone 24/7 because something might ping. That's never fun.
So out of curiosity, you being on call, I mean, essentially sounds like you're the help desk. Are there others that could have helped take that burden at least for part of the day or something, like out of
So
curiosity?
we sort of tried to and we actually had a schedule for who would be on call when and things like that. And eventually we also have kind of a team now in or I guess in Japan and Korea in terms of helping us with these things. So that obviously makes a big difference too. But I think at the time, I'm half Japanese. That's my name's a Japanese name, and I also speak Japanese.
Cool.
And so turns out our customers in Japan prefer to speak to someone, understandably, who speak the same language as them.
Right.
And it's hard to find engineers here who who can be as involved with the technical side when you have limited resources in terms of financial resources. Then you have to be pretty careful with each hire. And so kind of that mixed with this situation made it pretty difficult. And I felt like I was kind of in a little bit stuck in that kind of position because of that.
Yeah, all right. I see the difficulty with it. Imagine hiring an engineer. It's like, okay, day one. All right, let's have you join a Japanese class to start.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't exactly work. So it's
Yeah.
so it's definitely the hiring was pretty tricky back then.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things too, I think it's important to kind of do some self-reflection and understand your temperament and what it is that that actually would lead you to burnout, because it's going to be different for different people, right? And the solutions are going to be different. For instance, one of the things I learned about me is, learning that I like to get involved in different things often. What ended up helping me kind of stave off burnout is that I actually picked up a number of different hobbies, so that I can kind of jump to this thing, that's very different from my day job, and then do that for a while, and then jump to a different one, and then jump to a different one, and then come back to the first one, so I get that big variety in my life. Like I'll spend some time doing some painting, then I'll spend some time doing some modeling, then I'll spend a bunch of time on gaming, as breaks to work. And that kind of helps keep work fresh too, because since I don't spend all my time doing programming outside of work, when I'm at work, I don't feel so burnt out anymore, because my brain is in a completely different direction when I'm not working. But that works for me. There are other people who, that they like programming, so they program all day, and what's good for what they like to do is just program something different at night, but they still just want to always be programming, right? Or whatever it is they do. So I think it's important to kind of understand your own temperament and do some reflection.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's kind of interesting, because I think part of the reason I went into robotics is because it's, you have your mechanical engineering parts, you have your electrical engineering, you have your software, and these are, even within software, you have your embedded work and your computer vision and your, all sorts of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have like a bunch of math in the background that you have to kind of worry about as well. And so like, there's actually a lot of variety in that. And, and so that's actually a big reason why I gravitated towards robotics in the first place. And then I think starting a company, startups kind of do work well for someone like that, I think, because, you end up having to wear all the hats, right?
Right.
And then eventually, as Creston pointed out, I was also help desk, right? So it's not that I really want that hat, but,
right.
But it's a lot of, in my day to day, I still do, some project management things. I do some, low level development. I do, like driver development. I do sort of like robotics algorithms kinds of things. I do some sort of usually higher level things with our UI and our like web systems. And then also, I'm also the only person on the team who really knows how to do a lot of sort of like more of the 3D modeling and like animation kinds of things. So when we have a customer, with a lot of the marketing materials for specific customers or what, sort of proposals, I usually do a lot of that kind of thing. And then also I do a lot of marketing and sort of sales kinds of things with some customers. So really it's, that's, I think, Chris, what you did was you said, okay, well, I like variance, so I'll keep work kind of the way it is, but I'll find ways to kind of fulfill that need elsewhere in my own time. And I said, well, why don't I just make everything as varied as I can? And so that was kind of a different approach to solve the same problem, I think.
Yep. Yeah. And, something else I've noticed about myself too that keeps me happy at work is that, there's some people that like to deep dive into an area and I am just the specialist of that area. I'm the master of that thing. That's not how my brain likes to work. I like to know a bit about this and a bit about that and be the jack of all trades, and I can kind of shift departments and focuses as people need me to. But I don't want to say I'm not a master of it. Well, I'm not really a master of anything. I'm just good at a number of things, so that I can shift my focus. And, I found that for me, that's the way to avoid the burnout. So even at work, I do that a bit, not to the extent that you've kind of described for yourself, I don't think, but, cause I do still kind of crave that variety outside of work that has just, no technology involved at all. But I think it's, you know, it's a matter of temperament. And one of the things that I would advise to kind of keep yourself from burning out during your career is to really look at yourself and self-examine and understand what it is that you need to keep from getting bored in your career. So
I'll mention something on the tail of that, because as I was thinking about burnout, and for me, I think if it's doing something that I'm not jazzed to do, it doesn't light me up. I don't feel like I'm really good at it. Having to do those things, which of course, as Kota's mentioned, you have to wear a lot of hats, particularly if you're an entrepreneur. It's like, okay, got to do the marketing, got to do the sales, got to do the product, got to do, everything, got to do the security, got to do the legal and everything. There's a book I read that kind of put some of this in focus. There are other books that cover it as well, but so Michael Hyatt's book, Free to Focus, he talks about, really it's about focusing on what you're really good at and want to do, and kind of outsourcing everything else. Not that, basically try to take control and focus on what you're good at so you can be the best at it. But all those things that kind of burden you down and may cause more burnout if you're doing stuff you don't enjoy, finding ways to get rid of those. And that's kind of what I've done in terms of the people I have hired thus far. It's kind of like, I don't like doing documentation. Okay, let me get someone to do this. I don't like writing blog posts. Let me get someone to do this. I don't like doing video editing. Okay, let me get someone to do, so at every point, I'm like, I don't like doing this. Let me find something else to do it. So I'm free to focus on the other things that I'm really good at. So anyway, that book just, I remember it, and it's kind of, I don't know if it's a playbook I'm following, but it's kind of something I'm following to help me not be as burned out. I'll say it that way.
Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that I want to touch on too, that is, why do you think it's important for us to be having this discussion in this show? I mean, if I get burnt out, so what? What are the dangers? What are the ramifications? Why do we need to talk about this in the first place?
You explode. Not literally, but potentially. I mean, I'll throw my 2 cents in, potentially figuratively. I mean, you may lash out at your kids or your significant other, or or heaven forbid, other work-related areas. I don't know. And also physical manifestations. I'm sure that may be contributing to hair loss or weight gain or other things. If you're constantly in that, stressed or burned out state,
mm-hmm.
it can cause a whole host of issues. I mean, that's what I see. I don't know what Kota or you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very true. Also calling, if it's a rubber duck dev show, right? I mean, burnout's a big part of development, the kind of the real world of development, right? And it's something that a lot of people hit at some point in their career. So in that sense, it's probably a relatable experience for a lot of people who've had that, or who have had peers who have had that. And then also it's probably good to express, since probably younger engineers who don't necessarily know better might end up doing things that can, like, pretty heavily, especially when you have a new job, your first job out of school or something, you're really excited about it. And we had an employee who I kind of checked in with him about a month in, and asked him how he was doing, how he was feeling, and he said he was really excited and that he really likes the team, and that he was working till around 2 or 3 every morning because he was, he just wanted to learn more things and be able to contribute more. And I was like, let's hold off and let's not do that. So it's
right. Appreciate the enthusiasm, but
pace yourself.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things that I will bring up, one of the reasons that I really wanted to have this conversation, is because I think that burnout can lead to very dangerous things, primarily it can lead to depression. Some people are obviously going to be more prone to that than others, but if you burnout is a path to depression. And if you get to that point, that can be extremely dangerous. I've at points in my career, I struggled with depression because I let the burnout get out of control, and then it kind of got to be a negative spiral. And I don't want people to go through that. I want to bring this to light so that people can start recognizing, hey, I'm getting towards burnout. Let me do something about it before I get to more dangerous places. Because once if you get to those dangerous places, it's scary. It's scary for you. It's scary for your family. It's scary for your friends. And then, you're not doing anybody any good by getting there. So I'm hoping that kind of bringing this up will help people start thinking about ways to kind of control that and be cognizant of, if they're getting towards those things, to step back and take care of themselves so that they don't get burnout. Because we all want to enjoy our jobs. We all want to love getting up every morning and going to work, right? Nobody's going to do that 100% of every day. There's going to be days where you're like, oh God, I don't want to go do this today. But you should be overall happy with your job. And if you're getting to a burnout state, you need to do something to take care of yourself.
Out of curiosity, the thing you say about Kota said about engineers experiencing a fair amount of burnout potentially, what is the reason why? I mean, I know I've read something similar, but I can't recall why that is. I don't know if it's more prevalent than other positions. Do either of you know?
My guess would be that because development is such a mentally strenuous job, that it can tend more towards burnout, because burnout is really a mental thing.
Kota, did you have something you were going to say?
Yeah, but Chris, on the flip side, you also hear a lot about people who like assembly line workers and things like that experiencing burnout. And
true.
I mean, that's in some ways kind of the it's physical labor, same thing every day.
Right.
Sort of the opposite of development in a lot of ways. So yeah, I mean, it's probably a lot of it also just comes from the stressors and the relationships with your colleagues and things like that. I mean, I think even, for example, even something as benign as like, a team where maybe the code reviews are pretty slow or don't really happen, and you're just kind of slow, a little bit frustrated by that. And every day you get a little bit more frustrated. Eventually that's going to kind of boil over. So
I have heard that at super big companies where like someone joins and they've been there for 2 years, and every line of code they have produced, nothing has reached production, or some insane comment like that was made. And that, I can understand that wearing you down if or potentially burning you out, because it's like, well, what am I doing here? You might be thinking, I serve no purpose, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but I didn't know if anything particular about software engineering made it more stressful or not. I mean, frankly, I'm not stressed about when I do development. What's the most stressful thing that I do is, hey, we want to migrate this multi-terabyte database and have zero downtime and do this upgrade and not lose any bit of data. That is stressful.
Right.
Oh, and do it the migration as short as you can, seconds ideally, if not minutes. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's
but no
the
pressure
part. Right. Yeah. Writing code that even other people are reviewing, I'm like, that has less stress for me. But
yeah, here's a Huffy bicycle. We'd like this to be on Mars in about a month. Just go.
Yeah, kind of going back to something you said earlier, Chris. You mentioned that you took a couple of years off and did something totally different, right?
Mm-hmm.
We actually have an employee who actually, funnily enough, started as an artist, or like went to graphic design, I think, for at school, and then worked as like a snow at like a ski resort, basically maintaining the snow, and then went into software and was in software for maybe 5 to 10 years, and then burnt out pretty badly and quit software, and then started a brewery and did that for like 8 years, and then came back into software. He's actually very, very, he's a very, very solid engineer, but
Now
it's
with
kind of,
him, do you know what caused the software engineering burnout? Do you happen to know?
no, I actually
Okay,
haven't.
all right.
I mean, maybe that's something I don't know if that's something that I should have asked him, or maybe I shouldn't.
No, that's
But
all right. No, that's fine.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just interesting.
Hmm.
I mean, I wonder if some of the, I mean, because I think there's some aspects of burnout that are just, maybe just someone gets bored of kind of what they do and they just want to change.
I mean, I think
And I think it's
the
also important if that happens, then maybe accept it.
Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up about it too much. If it's something you need to do, if you feel you have another calling for something.
and we're kind of lucky in that software in general tends to be often, at least in the US, tends to be a fairly high paying job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that we kind of, and it's in demand enough that there is some mobility there, if that's something that you need, and so I think we're lucky in that sense to be in an industry where we have that kind of flexibility. So
Well, and yeah, and the kind of situation where if you can dream it, you can make it. We're not limited to we can only make this one widget. With software, you can make anything, um, even entire new worlds. So we are absolutely blessed to have uh, a calling like that, to have that kind of opportunity. But it can also be very daunting because it's so wide open and so big and so much to learn, and it can get overwhelming sometimes.
I'm
That's
sure
another
there's like,
thing. Sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I'm sure there's like a classification too of different main causes of burnout, right? Whether it's, we've talked a little bit about feeling like you're just doing the same kinds of things and not doing enough sort of variance, but there's also wow, there's just so much that's overwhelming and it's never ending.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's the burnout that comes from having maybe just colleagues that are unpleasant to work with and then having to do that every day. And although in some ways that's kind of the same thing. And then there's also the burnout of why am I doing this when there's no purpose, if I'm at a big company and the thing never gets released. And so it seems like there's like all sorts of different types of burnouts, and in some ways it seems like they manifest themselves in somewhat similar ways. And I guess as
Yeah.
people there aren't that many things we can do, and shutting down is a pretty easy one.
Right.
So
I mean, take a regular vacation. That's helpful, but
Oh yeah, I was
so
gonna say kind of what you were saying is kind of like being on the hamster wheel. So as fast as everything moves in technology, for this particular career path, for doing software engineering, you need to keep up to speed a lot. Like imagine, I can't, I don't know why blacksmithing came to mind, but if you were a blacksmith, there's a certain defined number of things you need to learn, and then you can just master those few things. Whereas software engineering, there's new crap being thrown at you on a daily basis
right. The
that you have
number
to
of
get up to speed
JavaScript
and learn.
frameworks that have come out in the past decade is insane. But
Yeah, so I see how that fitting in under one of your categories it causes stress and burnout. Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, and actually I think for me, one of the things that's really helped is just kind of, I think I tend to get prone to a few of these different things. Just the we at any point in time have a lot of different things going on, and of course we dealt. Now we have different teams doing different things, but it still, when you're kind of looking at all these different things, and you're like, well, all this come together on time. There's a lot kind of to, and I think like one of the big causes for burnout is feeling like you're not really making any real progress. So I have this notebook where every day I write down, what I've been doing, or what I did the day before. Yes, what I'm going to do that day, and then also sort of what I'm like, what I'm grateful for, like just a few different things, and then sort of, a couple things about like what I'm good at, and then kind of what the, just a couple like big goals of like, okay, these are the things I'm really trying to accomplish. And then at the end of the day, I kind of look back and I review it and I write the tasks for the next day. And it's actually really nice because I have this record now where, kind of years worth of notebooks where I can just kind of look back and say, wow, you know, when I think back at it, I can't really think of that many things that I've done, but there's kind of these stacks of books that tell me otherwise. And that actually, I think, really helps in terms of keeping the motivation and keeping like feeling like I'm moving forward. Um, and also just, it's a good motivator as well.
Right.
So,
well, I like one of the things that you said you did. I liked all of that. But one of the things you said you did specifically that really stuck out to me is that you write down a few things every day that you're thankful for. And I think that's extraordinarily helpful because it gets your brain to focus on good things instead of languishing in bad things. So I'm going to steal that from you. Thanks very much. And start and try that myself. Because I think positive attitudes go a long way to driving off things like burnout and depression and stuff like that.
Yeah, I had actually a few different bouts of pretty bad depression. So it's a lot of my habits at this point have come from how do I avoid getting depression? Mm-hmm. And if I'm starting to feel a little bit of it, then if I start to feel like I'm, moving in that direction, then I kind of try to, take a step back and try to figure out what's going on there and try to have more of a positive mindset as well. So that, I think those things actually in the long run can help a lot. Not that I've had, very long, continued success in terms of just, it's like last time I had burnout was not that long ago, but
right.
Yep.
Yeah, I really like, I need to get back on the wagon, as it were, because I was doing some of that. There was another book I read called The Gap and the Gain that kind of iterated that. Basically, focus on the gain you have, not the gap for where you want to be. So it's basically, they kind of do something similar to what you're mentioning. They advocate writing down, I think it's 3 things that you accomplished that day. You presumably accomplished something, and then what do you intend to accomplish tomorrow? And don't necessarily beat yourself up if you don't accomplish those things, but just still recognize that you at least accomplished something.
Well, I think having a day to get rest is an accomplishment. You got to do that for yourself once in a while.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I read something about there was like I don't remember which Atomic Habits, maybe, I think.
Is that James Clear book, I think?
Yeah, James Clear. That's
okay.
Right. And in that book, he talks about how there's this, I think the British like cycling team, men's cycling team used to be very weak. And then they, hired a new coach, and his goal basically was to just improve the team like 1%, but do that every day. Right. So, and in the course of a couple of years, they actually became the top team in the world, they dominate apparently almost every year. And kind of the way they did this was they looked at, even with the bikes, they looked at, okay, how can we save like shave off just even if it's a tiny bit of weight. How can you shave that off? Let's look at the suits. With the training, let's try to optimize everything and do like video analysis of what people are doing. And essentially every single thing they did, each thing only gave like a very small improvement. But when you combine everything together, you know, that's going to make a big difference. And I think kind of thinking positively and kind of moving forward also fit under that same category, where it's not really about, hey, we need like these big accomplishments, but just kind of keeping that mindset and just doing a little bit to move forward in that way as well, and to improve your work-life balance, or to, you know, reduce the amount of stress you have and everything. Really, it's the trajectories that's important, not really, you know, not exactly like where you are, but, you know, where you're going to end up and how you get there, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. So we are, this is a fun conversation, but we're running up on time here. So just to kind of wrap things up a little, the big takeaways I'm kind of getting from this conversation, which has been really enjoyable actually, is that, you know, burnout happens to almost all of us. It's not a bad thing. It's not something to be ashamed of. Everybody goes through it. But it's something you want to pay attention to, because it can lead to more dangerous mental states. And I can, at least two of us from personal experience can tell you that those mental states are not good. They're not fun. They're not a good place to be. And we hope that maybe this will help you to pay attention to this, so that you don't also get to those places. But, you know, keep yourself healthy, keep yourself mentally focused on what you need to focus on to make sure that you're not burning yourself out, and deal with those things, because that's just as important as getting the code right. You know, you have to take care of yourself. So I'm hopeful that this conversation will help somebody, and you know, try to look at yourself, understand yourself, and take care of yourself, please, because we need, you know, more developers, not a bunch of burnout developers. So anyway, Kota, thank you very much for coming and joining us today. It's always so fun to have conversations with you. I love talking to you, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. As always, yeah, it's always really fun. So
yeah. So friends, if you haven't already, please do consider giving us a thumbs up, like this video, subscribe, and ding the notification bell so you know when these videos drop, now that we're pre-recording them. Also, you can reach out to us, rubberduckdevshow@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter, X, whatever it is now, @DuckyDevShow. We will be back next week. We haven't decided on the topic yet, so, you know, if you've got suggestions, throw them in the comments. If you've got things that you do for yourself that help you stave off burnout, please also throw those in the comments, because we'd love to learn from you. And you can listen to this as a podcast anywhere that podcasts live. You pick your favorite provider. We're probably there. So we will see you next week. And until then, happy coding.
Happy coding.
all right, happy coding.